Ah, yes. Good old me reviewing games completely out of order. Well, while I do eventually want to talk about the RE2 remake, I've actually been wanting to talk about Remake 3 more, for a few reasons. One, it was met with fairly divisive reviews and thoughts from both fans and critics when it was first released, for various reasons. And two, while I do love the survival horror genre, I'm not exactly all that great at it. Games like Clock Tower 3 or such with more of an action spin and less puzzles and stealth I can enjoy a lot, but I'm the guy who somehow managed to hardlock himself out of beating the RE2 remake when I got to the sewers the first time I played it. So I decided to go with a remake of one of the few older Resident Evil games I can fully enjoy, that being Resident Evil 3, mainly due to, again, its more action-oriented focus, which is alive and well here thankfully. This remake does a lot right and quite a bit wrong, and I'm here to let you know what I thought of it all. Following Jill Valentine after the events of the first remake, we find that our master of unlocking and favorite sandwich flavor has become a sleep-deprived and night terror-riddled conspiracy nut hell-bent on tearing down Umbrella once and for all, to put a stop to any future Arklay incidents. 5 days before she is able to leave Raccoon City, however, a new nightmare begins, one that consumes her already nightmarish life. So overall, the story is good. I say fairly because while the first half of the game, where Jill runs around the streets of Raccoon City completing tasks and aiding the Umbrella rescue team flows nicely, the second half of the story drags its feet heavily, and it gets bogged down with story beats that should have been incredibly simple. The opening to the game started off rough before it got really good. As while I adored getting to look around Jill's apartment, reading notes, and getting caught up in lore, along with seeing all the in-universe products and goodies, along with a bit of environmental visual character to Jill herself, it's just so over the top. Now, I know that may sound weird, but here, from the nightmare sequence where Jill sees through her closed eyes, to the ADHD-riddled introduction to Nemesis, it didn't leave me room to catch my breath, and not in a good way. See, I can endure a brisk and urgent opening, but here, it just felt tacky, and as it felt if it didn't have explosions and gore in the first 5 minutes, that people would tune out immediately. I would have preferred a more subdued start, perhaps Jill asking her gathering neighbors outside of her apartment about what is going on before an explosion is heard, causing people to freak out, and Jill, being the hero she is, to go check it out. I wish we just saw the Umbrella ad talking about how they aren't doing anything wrong at all before seeing Nemesis be created and shipped off to take out Jill. Outside of that, the introduction of UBCS, specifically the flirty and charismatic Carlos, the trek through the quickly corrupting city, and the run-ins with not only Nemesis himself, but also shady conspiracists are a treat to experience. While not the most graceful of progression, I can definitely sum up the first half of the game as basically a playable late-year theater experience. It has the spectacle, the fun, and sometimes the tedious moments big-budget entertainment like this has. Where the story really starts to suffer is when the game gets to the hospital, and it just becomes a back and forth with the extremely underwhelming mustache-twirling villain, who, while yes, was there earlier in the game, it's just now set in the nauseating hospital and underground labs. I sorta wish the game decided to pick and stick with a tone, because having the game feel like a fun explosion fest for the majority of the time, only to be hit with a depressing visual or note, really brought the mood down. I know this is survival horror, but the more dreary and drab setting worked better with Resident Evil 2, because the characters in that were the contrasting hope that the game needed. Here, the story itself feels fun, but a lot of things around bring that fun down a lot. Not that it's bad, I just feel that maybe it would have been better suited being included in Remake 2 instead of here. In terms of characters, the game was good outside of some Jill's angst and the extremely annoying main villain the game has. Jill was, for the most part, likable and kind-hearted. I get that having her be wary about the Umbrella troops made sense, but her swear-laden annoyance at them feels try-hard at best and juvenile at worst.
You mean the alley that's on fire?
Maybe. Surely a tall drink of water like yourself can put out a few flames.
Fuck you.
Her early bickering with Carlos is frustrating, but thankfully it doesn't last long, and when they start quipping and working off each other in terms of conversation, it made me really enjoy Jill a whole lot more.
It's alright, you're going ahead. I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
Okay.
Outside of the bits of frustration, Jill was an all-around good person and the right level of both heroic and noble. Only issue with all of that is even when she is seemingly in danger, it feels like she has the thickest of plot armors. Not once did I worry about her because she managed to survive things that would have killed literally even some of the most strongest people 10 times over. I get suspending disbelief, but I feel like those could have been worked towards instead of thrust in the opening. Outside of growing to trust Carlos and Tyrell, I never really felt like she had all that much of a character arc, which is only an issue since this is supposed supposed to be an introduction to new fans who are now getting to know Jill if they never played the original remake. Carlos was probably my favorite character, being a caring yet witty and smart-ass merc who wanted to only do the right thing and help those in need. His relationship with Jill felt natural, his friendship with Tyrell was a good dynamic, and overall it was nice to have a badass still remain human and relatable. Tyrell was a good bro to Carlos, and I really enjoyed the fact that Mikhail was actually a good guy up to his heroic sacrifice.
Get off my train, shitbird!
I just wish they got a bit more screen time than what they got. At least all of it was good, which is not something at all I can say about the main villain Nikolai. It's been a while since I've seen a bad guy so boring, drab, and personality-less as much as Nikolai was. We got no motivation past his greed, which fits into the heavy-handed capitalism bad message at the end of the game, and from the get-go, he's just lacking anything that would have made him compelling. From the very first moment he is on screen, he is shown to be ruthless, but it would have been more interesting if he used the trust the team was building with Jill to his advantage. But alas, he is just a waste and does nothing more than taunt Jill and company. Nemesis was cool and creepy to look at, but goodness, he wasn't all that interesting either. We get to know he was made to hunt down the remaining members of STARS, but outside being a big lumbering force, he gets absolutely no character. He is better than Nikolai by default for the fact that he at least has the excuse of being a biomutant monster who was just created with a singular goal in mind. Umbrella City really comes to life here, as the visual storytelling through the ads seen scattered around in Jill's place and on the streets made me go, oh, when I recognized the local location. It was nice that everything, for the most part, felt like it actually belonged, despite some of the locations being way too modern or decrepit feeling, despite taking place in the late 1990s. In terms of gameplay, everything is as crisp and tight as it should be, leaning more on being a straight-up shooter with occasional puzzles and very light inventory management. Remake 3 still keeps enough of the traditions of its series to not be what many fans would call a bastardization, despite this being easily the most action-focused entry in the entire series thus far. Ammo is plentiful enough that I never ran out of it for any of my weapons, even the more powerful ones in the arsenal. Puzzles were quick and snappy, requiring just enough thought to make you feel smart, but easy enough you weren't hooked on them for long enough that they would begin to drain your energy. Honestly, this is the easiest Resident Evil game so far. While it is easier, it still has fair challenge and death awaiting you if you don't have at least some skill and thought put into your actions. Instead of getting the ability to discard your combat knight if grappled by a zombie, you instead now have a dodge that, while hard to use, felt great to pull off, and you also now have to push enemies off you by mashing the X button. While I do like the idea of the dodge and felt fantastic when managing to land it, especially as Carlos, I honestly wish they had kept the ability to trash your knife for a free bit of health. Guns ult felt good, even though I do feel they are still a bit too floaty overall. I say that because while landing a headshot or shredding an enemy was satisfying, it was more so due to the visuals and the gore, and not so much to the weight or the sound. Despite me despising having to stay in place to shoot in games like Resident Evil 4, something about that really did aid the guns in feeling a bit more meaty than they do here. That isn't to say I didn't have fun with the weapons on offer, because that's just not true. Jill's expanding lineup, including upgrades to her pistol and shotgun, were very nice, and gave me a very pleasant sense of reward and progression for exploring every nook and cranny around to find said upgrades. With a standard pistol and plenty of attachments, a shotgun with its own parts, a burst pistol, grenade launcher, and a magnum, I wasn't disappointed, especially since Carlos had his machine gun that could be decked out with various tactical bits. While I did have fun as Jill, which is very important since she fills more of the playtime ratio, I found myself enjoying Carlos's sections a lot more. The quality of life improvements from Remake 2 are all here, but even better. The ability to check your map and know if you've gotten everything in a room is helpful. Even more helpful here is being able to know when you're allowed to trash certain items that are no longer of use. My favorite addition here is outside of the first time picking up an item, once you collect the same item again, it is automatically entered into an open slot in your inventory instead of you having to confirm it each time like in the previous games. I usually have a tough time with shooters on a gamepad, third-person shooters especially, since I always turn off aim assist and I'm used to a mouse, but here, while I did occasionally have some wonky moments aiming, I got used to it. The controls are really solid, even if there were a few moments I accidentally would hit the map or menu button while running or aiming. The controller integration with games can be hit or miss, but here I really liked it. I enjoyed that the controller speakers were used for radio calls, and I liked how the lights indicated your health, although that is one of my only issues, is that after being hit, unlike in Remake 2, you are no longer told what status you are on screen, just a controller or in the menu. The inventory here is phenomenal, and never once did I find myself scrambling or stressing over items or ammo like in previous entries. It all felt fluid and kept the experience fast, fun, and overall very pleasant to me as the player. Okay, so I'm recording this in post to say that there's these little collectibles you can find scattered around the map. I never figured out what they do, but if you shoot them, you collect them, and they're in the game. Just wanted to bring that up. Enemies for the game were all disgusting and visually unique. Zombies outside of some reused models were lumbering, meaty roadblocks for you to fight your way through, and the slowly growing biomutants possessed a challenging threat. The only issue I had with the combat is despite this being more action focused, it could still take 5 or more headshots to finally put down an enemy, and even then you wouldn't know it for certain if it was dead. I don't need instant enemy death, but more feedback would have been nice. I did like the zombies playing dead at first, but as time went on, I just wish they were as weak as they usually are in media. The hunter gammas were a bit of a step down from the original, but were still grotesquely frightening abominations of hunger. The impregnating insects were absolutely vile, and the shell-clawed hunter betas were dangerous. There were also a few other enemies that popped up and kept the variety from getting stale. Also, on the note of the difficulty, I really do appreciate that even though the zombies are a bit spongy, here they don't actually become near invincible annoyances like they did in Remake 2 on the harder modes. They still feel as fair as they do on the normal difficulty, which I was very happy about. The only boss fights in the game were different forms of Nemesis. The first 2 boss fights with him were fun and what you would expect, but once he begins to mutate into a quick wild gore animal, it just felt like I was shooting a sponge without much strategy. The final boss also sadly had the sin of just being a few cutscenes with shoot the orange thing spliced in twice, which was disappointing, although I did like the laser railgun a lot. Visually, the game is incredible, but I can say that about most games now. Does it do anything to stand apart? Not anything in particular, but it is a very nice game to look at. Environments early on are varied and fresh, but I didn't care for the sterile lab or the confusing and headache-inducing hospital level that honestly just made me want to go play Nocturne. Every weapon and object was finely detailed. Characters looked good, but still have that odd RE Engine look to them that makes them look oddly gross facial feature-wise. Carlos was invoking an odd Keanu Reeves type look, and this extended into his voice and mannerisms. Still looked a bit too square for my tastes in the face, especially compared to our original look, but again, nothing was too bad to look at visually. It has that weird feel that RE Engine games have. Everything just looked good, if not a bit uncanny like I just said, and that's fine, because while it not only looked really good, it also ran flawlessly. I'm running this on a PS4 Pro, but there wasn't a moment of slowdown, and while I was forced to record it at 30 FPS due to capture card limitations, the game was running at a solid 60 the entire time. The only technical aspect of the game I disliked was the low FOV when in first person at the opening. It was short, thankfully, but still gross to play due to how cramped it felt. I also have to say that I love seeing all the Capcom Easter eggs scattered around the environment. Here they didn't feel like forced references, but instead felt like a love letter to the company with in-universe application. Things like Mega Man action figures, a movie poster for 1942, or Morrigan as a bar's mascot, to name a couple of the Easter eggs you'll find scattered around. Sound-wise, this was probably the weakest department of the game. Not bad, but it wasn't spectacular. I can't remember any of the music, even though I wrote this review minutes after playing the game. The voice acting ranged from competent.
Yeah. Welcome, Leon. Bet you had a kick-ass first day.
Carlos, respond.
Yeah, what's up?
We didn't make it. The train derailed.
Derailed? Was anyone hurt?
No, everybody's dead. Mikhail, everybody.
I've never seen anything like it. But it's no zombie. It knows what it wants and won't stop till it gets it. Don't you like that in a man?
No thanks. He's all yours.
Too extremely bland or overly comical and cringe-inducing.
Listen, I promise you're in good hands. I'm with the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service. UBCS for short.
Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? You guys are the ones who caused all of this.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Next time, take the fucking hit!
All right, Super Cop. Here you go. We can use this to stay in contact.
I know what a radio is.
Also, the guns didn't sound nearly as powerful as they should have. The main ambience was nice though, and nothing ever sounded annoying, so with that being the case, it was still alright overall. There was only a few things I have left to touch on, like the fact that while this supposedly takes place half before Remake 2 and half after, some of the events just don't line up, such as Carlos opening lockers and safes before Leon ever did, while taking what is inside. It's mostly me being nitpicky, but this sort of stuff really can take me out of a game. Also, I beat the game in 5 hours, which for me is fine, but I also got the game for $15 bundled with Remake 2. I cannot imagine spending $60 on this, and the fact that they try to justify it by including a tacked-on multiplayer game is really lame to me. I don't play multiplayer games, and I don't pay for online, so this is entirely useless to me. I personally don't care about certain cut bits from the original game, as they would have been padding I don't want, but the resistance mode should not have been including if it made the price as much as it was. That, and the fact there is no true New Game Plus, only a point store meant for new runs where you can use feat points to get equipment, a single costume outside of a pre-order only bonus, and no multiple endings does leave a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, only because I feel they were cut so they could ship the game with resistance instead. And with all that said, outside of all of my negatives, I did generally have a really fun evening with Remake 3, and I managed to beat it in one sitting, which is always a nice experience. It's a blast of excitement and big budget thrills that will keep you on your toes, and a smile plastered on your face for the majority of the game. With better action, a good pace, and overall solid execution, if you're able to pick this up for a good price, or especially bundled with Remake 2, and are wanting a solid bit of game, this is something you should give a play, especially for the Halloween season. As always, if you want to help support the channel, please consider sharing the video with a friend or checking out my Patreon linked in the description below. A big thank you to my wonderful friend Orion Knight for drawing up these wonderful animation stills of Punish Neat. If you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, leave them in the comments as I read and reply to everything. Until next time, this is Thierry Williamson signing off until the next video. See ya guys!